Good evening, everyone. My name is Frederick Thibault. I'm the General Manager of Planning at the Halton County School Board. I'm joined here with a few of my colleagues in planning services. We'll introduce ourselves tonight. I'm also joined here this evening with Jonathan Schosch. He's my co-chair for the BRC committee, and we'll also introduce you to the Boundary Review Steering Committee members as well throughout the presentation. So we'll do with that. So again, I really do want to thank everybody first and foremost for partaking in this process. I know it's a huge time commitment. It is a lot of resources to go through. It's a lot of time to have these discussions. So we are very thankful for you doing this with us over the next few weeks. We're hoping to get this process done by December, ideally. So we'll have a few meeting schedules. We'll go through that today as well. But again, I just want to say a big thank you for joining us this evening. So with that, I'll hand it over to Jonathan Schosch, our out-of-area superintendent.
So we always begin our meetings, our board meetings, our executive leadership meetings, and so on with a land acknowledgement. So you can follow along up there on the screen. I'm just going to read it here. So Halton, as we know today, is rich in history and the modern traditions of many First Nations in the Métis. From the Anishinaabe to the Arawandaren, the Haudenosaunee, and the Métis, these lands surrounding the Great Lakes are steeped in Indigenous history. As we gather today on these treaty lands, we have the responsibility to honor and respect the four directions: land, waters, plants, animals, ancestors that walk before us, and all the wonderful elements of creation that exist. We'd like to acknowledge and thank the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation for sharing their traditional territory with us. And then we usually follow the land acknowledgement with a bit of a reflection or something. So I'll keep it brief tonight, just to keep in the forefront of everyone's mind that all of our schools in Halton are on the territory of our First Nation partners. And in fact, it's kind of interesting when you look around the board and you see, a school like Woodnawi, for example, the number of schools that are now being named after with Indigenous language. Right? So it's kind of cool to see the shift away and into that of thinking and approaches. So we're really proud of the work that we've done around Indigenous awareness and perspectives. And as you may be aware, it is one of the areas of focus of our multi-year plan. So thank you. And thank you all for being here. This is really, really important work. So thanks for your commitment.
So with that, I wouldn't mind just giving an opportunity for our trustee attendees tonight, which are also Boundary Review Committee members, as well as membership of the Boundary Review Steering Committee. So maybe starting from the left over, we'll work our way through. Kelly, if you want to kick us off.
Hi, I'm Kelly Amos. I'm responsible for wards 5 and 7. So that's the whole area. So I know many of you are from there. So thank you for coming.
Tanya?
Hi everyone, I'm trustee Tanya Rocha. I look after wards 3 and 6. So essentially that's everything east of Trafalgar. So thank you for coming.
Carol sent her regrets for tonight.
Okay.
Joanne?
Hi, I'm Joanna Oliver, Ward 4 trustee. So that's Abbey Park, Garthweb, and the feeder school, specifically Forest Trend, which will be included in this review.
Hi, I'm Amy Collard. I'm from Burlington, Ward 5. I'm the out-of-area trustee. We always have an out-of-area trustee sitting in on boundary reviews just to get that more balanced perspective, because I don't know your schools. So there we go. Hopefully I'll learn stuff.
Thanks, everyone. So for this evening's introduction or agenda, we have 3 major parts. So part 1 is just really going through the icebreaker, giving everyone an opportunity to present themselves. Afterwards, we're just going to have a little bit of an icebreaker session with the Menti and the Jam board just to show you how it works. Afterwards, we'll go through some housekeeping items. We'll be doing this for every single meeting, just going through some of the administrative items of the process. We're going to go through the background information, namely the administrative procedure, what we're going to be doing, roles and responsibilities of both committees, the steering and the parent or the Boundary Review Committee proper. Then afterwards, we're going to go into the more technical side of things. So first, what I want to do is I want you guys to get familiar with the materials. So we've provided you with some printouts of everything. Everything else will be provided digitally, or if you want to continue having some printout copies, let us know. We can send them over to you through the school. And afterwards, we're going to go through 4 options this evening, as well as what the status quo scenario is for how things are progressing right now. And the last part for this evening is we're not really going to have an open discussion about the options. Really, what we're going to do is just have questions and comments about the process. And then next week, it's going to be a lot less of me talking and a lot more breakout sessions, you guys discussing the options and then developing further options from there. So let's start off some introductions. So we've gone through the trustees. Jonathan and myself have presented ourselves. So maybe now I'll just pass it over to the other affected superintendents in the area. So maybe I'll start with David.
Hi everyone, I'm David Gold. I'm filling in for Jackie Newton, superintendent for Bach and Abbey Park.
Jenny sends her regrets this evening. Unfortunately, she couldn't make it. So I'll pass it over to Claire.
Hi, Claire Proto, Superintendent, Air Coverage, and White Oaks County Schools.
In terms of the planning department, I'll start with you, Mitch.
Everybody, analysts, probably seeing my emails.
I missed Lorraine, so I'll pass it over to you.
Lorraine Choi, Senior Analyst for the Planning Department. I guess I'm the one that generates all the numbers. So if you have any questions about numbers, I'm the person. So there you go.
And then we have Maria Hawksper, which is at the front. She's responsible for developing all the mapping, the walkwebs, and things of that nature. And then online, we have Andrew Kaplan from Halton Student Transportation Services. Andrew, do you want to present yourself?
Sure. Yeah, I'm Andrew Kapern, Senior Analyst with Halton Student Transportation. Been there for about 6 years, so happy to help.
Thanks, Andrew. All right, now I'll just take an opportunity for all of our parent representatives to present yourself. So maybe what I'll do, instead of going through the list here, I'll just start on your side, Mark, and then we'll just make our way around the horseshoe. Just a couple words about yourself and the community you represent.
My name is Mark Uriarty. My children go to Post Corners, and I have 3 children.
I'm Allison McDougall Walters. I have 1 child at Post Corners.
I'm Jennifer Tessman. I have 1 child at Sunnydale, previous one who just graduated.
I am Jen Paswani. My son goes to Sunnydale and my older son just graduated in Toronto.
I'm Sylvia Shore. I have 3 kids at Illinois.
My name is Jessica Harrison. I'm the English program representative from Dr. David R. Williams. I've lived in that neighborhood since it was built, since 2018. I have 2 young children. We bought our house there because Dr. David R. Williams was being built.
Hi everyone, I'm Hiba. I'm the FI rep from David R. Williams. I have 2 kids there. They moved from Udanawi at the last Boundary Review. And my eldest is at White Oaks. She moved from Sunnydale to Udanawi at the Boundary Review before that. So I've done that a few times. But yeah, hopefully
the last. Hi, my name is Ola. I have 3 kids at River Oaks, and we're out of the boundary of River Oaks, but because we don't have a school in our area because it's new, my kids are in River Oaks, and I think we're going to be affected by this.
I'm Rachel Cameron. I have 2 children at River Oaks, grade 8 and grade 3, and an older son at Oakville NE. An older son who just went, he used to be at Oakville, but now he's at Holy Trinity. We've also been bounced around Oakville, Sunnydale, River Oaks. And I went to Sunnydale as a child. So yeah.
I went to the school as a child.
Fantastic. Hi everyone, I'm Marcus Chowdhury. I have 1 son at Munns, and I'm on the parent council there. I have another son at River Oaks and 2 daughters at White Oaks. And there's 1 little one starting at River Oaks in September.
Maybe.
I'm done now. Now I'm done.
All right, so a lot of schools.
I get a prize.
Thanks, everyone. So with that, what I'll do is I'll break it out into the Menti session. So what is Menti? Menti is just a tool that we like to use. Like I said earlier, it's something that's really nice when we're trying to ask questions and get everyone's opinions on it. We can ask questions about, how do you rate things? What are your thoughts? Throw some ideas on the screen. We can do it very quickly, and then we can also keep that as part of the record. So that way it's something that's very easy to go through, or even if there's individuals that are a little bit less comfortable in kind of expressing their thoughts, or there's a contentious issue, at least this way we can get to the heart of the matter and we can just get to the facts, which is always good. So a lot of times there's a couple ways of going about it. Either you can just go to menti.com, and afterwards it'll ask you to enter a code, which is just down here in the bottom corner. The QR code, you might be a little bit too far for it to work. I might be wrong.
No, it's working.
Oh, there you go. Oh, let's get out of your way. And it always tells you how many people are attending and everything else. So, and trustees and staff you can join into. They're just icebreaker questions. They're fun ones.
Could you read the numbers out?
Absolutely. The number is 2350 0360.
So scanning it won't.
Scanning it will do that too. You can do either or, either scan it and it'll pop you in, or oh, yep, that's, if you're getting that screen, that means I haven't started a presentation yet. So we got about a few people in there.
Sorry, what was the code again?
The code's up top now. It's just 2350 0360. Is everybody in, or are we still having some? The Wi-Fi might be a bit slow, perhaps. Is it giving you issues, or?
No, I'm trying to remember the number.
Oh, okay.
Looking at it. 2350.
Yeah, 2350 0360.
Thank you.
So like I said, there's an example. So if we're going through something like we will next week, we're going to be talking about what kind of criteria do we think are important when we're looking at boundaries. So we can get some ideas on the board, like is it walking, is it transportation, is it neighborhood communities, things like that. And this is a good way to just throw all the ideas on it, and then we can open that up for discussion. So this is a good way of, and then you'll see some like-minded ideas there pop up too. So as the same word comes up or the same kind of theme, we'll get bigger and bigger in terms of the size of the word. The next one here is, what's your learning style? Do you like to listen rather than reading, analyze pictures, graphs, charts, hands-on, watching a demo, saying things out loud? And again, this is another thing too, where we can rate certain options as to, you know, how do you feel about this criteria? Is this the more important one? Or, you know, what's this particular issue for you? You know, and then we can just get a sense of the room of, you know what, a lot of people think, let's do things with graphical representation so that we can express an idea. And that way it kind of helps us guide the discussion too. This is one that we'll probably be using a lot. This is a good way of trying to look at various options and even rating them. So in this case is, what's a good warm beverage? Probably not in here tonight because it is very warm. But yeah, here we would rate things on 0 to 5, like which one's your favorite option? How well does this option or this hot drink meet your criteria for what you need on a fall day or something of the sort? And what it does is that everyone's response will just average things out. So at the end of it, we can almost see it's like, what's everyone's thoughts, especially when we have a larger group, on what they think about this option and kind of put a value to it. And then last one is if so this is just something that you can, you know, put in your own question or your own statement or your own thoughts. And then what it does, it just provides all of those statements on a kind of a one sheet, and then we can have a discussion around those issues or topics or what have you. And at the end of it, what we'll do with these is that we'll make them part of the record, so they'll be part of the minutes. So when we're having these discussions, then we can refer to them, and we can also have them as part of the presentation too, so that people can reference them. At the end of a public information meeting, when we have the wider public, we can do the same thing too, so that we can, you know, say, hey, this is how everyone thought about what they thought about these particular topics. And then the Jamboard link, I'll just show this one very quickly. This is another example of what we'll be doing. I won't go too much into detail, but when we're going to have our breakout sessions next week, what we'll do is we'll break everyone out into groups. We'll have staff members, and you'll also have trusted representation. And then we're going to be discussing options. We're going to be discussing a certain topic. And this will be a way where the person that's facilitating that group discussion will be able to take your thoughts, put little Post-it notes on it, and throw it right onto the screen, so that when we come back as a larger group, we have a record of that breakout group, the things that you thought were important, and then we can debrief on them and put it as a whole. So then we say, okay, well, what does everybody think? And distill it down to, as a group, what do we think of these particular issues? Any questions on that? In terms of how we'll be moving forward, or if anything else comes up, by all means, let me know. So again, for today's goal, the big thing is I just want you guys to understand the process. We'll go through the options. I want you to feel comfortable, and then we're not really going to dive deep into it for today. We'll give you about a week till our next meeting next Thursday, and then that way when we get into it, you'll have enough time to be familiar with the materials and not diving right into it. So today we'll try to keep it light. Big thing about these meetings too is we'll be having a number of them. We're going to be becoming pretty intimate in terms of the issues, our own perspectives, what our thoughts are. So really the thing that we really do endorse as a board is to be hard on the issues and be soft on the people. We're all coming here with a different perspective or different views or different values and what's important to us, and we're all trying to kind of balance all that together to get the best outcome for our families, our communities, and our children. So really it's about going through the consensus building model. You might not always get the answer that you want, but at least we're getting to an ideal solution that meets not perfectly everyone's needs and wants, but at least it balances all out in the end. And then we always want to try to be, positive about what we're trying to do and have this as a risk-free environment. I want everybody to feel comfortable in kind of expressing their thought, their views, and their ideas. It's a safe place. It's meant to be able to bounce ideas off and figure things out through the process. In terms of observers, so in our AP, we do have something where members of the public are able to kind of have a view into what these proceedings look like for the Boundary Review committees. Because of the size of this one and because of some of the venues we may have and the management of it and some of the difficulties that come with it, what we've done instead, just to maintain full transparency, is we're going to video record these meetings and they're all going to be available online afterwards for consumption. So people can review them, access them, and double check on everything that they want. At least this way too, the advantage is, it stays there. Whereas before we just had these meetings you attended and it was gone. Now we have the benefit, it's part of the record. In terms of questions or requests, I know you're gonna have a few yourselves, I'm sure. And you might also get some from the community. So feel free that if you're not comfortable answering the questions, that you can always send it over to us. We do have a dedicated email for that. And you can also direct them to the website. It's very important to send them over to the website because that's where all the materials are going to be posted. All the materials I provide to you or our team provides to you, all our minutes, all of our presentation notices, it's all there. So as long as they're familiar with the website, they'll be well informed. And if they have questions, that's the way to access it. And you'll have access to these slides too. In terms of background information, before I jump into that, any questions about the things I just discussed? Are we all good? So in terms of background, it's almost been a year already, but we got board approval to commence a boundary review process for the North Oakville area as well as south of Dundas. And the intent of that is to establish new boundaries for the Oakville number 3 and Oakville number 5 schools that are planned in the North Oakville secondary plan and north of Dundas. As part of that too, we want to also look at rebalancing enrollment at some of the schools that we've been seeing some pressures in the south. So that was the purpose of the boundary review and why it was approved to move forward. We're a little bit delayed in starting it because we definitely want to have a good cut of numbers as well as reviewing all of our development deals to make sure that we're as accurate as possible because this is something that we're trying to establish for the long term so we're not having to come back over and over again to do these reviews. The work that we've completed thus far, we have met as a boundary review steering committee. One of the mandates from the steering committee, first and foremost, is to determine what schools are going to be impacted as part of the process. So prior to the summer start, we did confirm what schools we wanted to have as part of this in order to address the issue, which is student enrollment pressures in the south, as well as the opening of 2 new schools. And the other mandate they had is determining what kind of pathway we're going to be doing, pathway 1 or 2. Given the complexity, the amount of students we're going to be moving, and so forth, we've decided with the pathway 1, which is a full community consultation process like we're doing now. Afterwards, as part of this process too, as we're all developing option, ultimately, as we get to the end of the process, the steering committee is going to be responsible for selecting whatever option or options the boundary review committee selects themselves as their preferred, and then we'll present that to our senior team, then to the board of trustees, which make the final decision. Not just the trustees here this evening, the whole board of trustees. So they'll all have an opportunity to vote on the matter. So these are decisions that were made both before the summer started and afterwards. We met again just September, right? Seems like it was just yesterday. In just terms of selecting the schools, the pathway, and scoping the options. In terms of the Boundary Review Committee's roles and responsibilities, I'll just go through these. The first one is to review the initial boundaries. So these are the boundaries that the steering committee had selected. So those are the ones we're presenting to you tonight. That's the starting gun. So there's going to be a lot more that come after that. Afterwards, next week, what we'll be doing is providing those initial comments on those options that we've had. And through the process, we're going to be developing new options, tweaking existing options, and discussing what other modifications can be made to enhance those options. So we may end up with multiple new options that we'll be reviewing as a team over the next few meetings. So I just have to let one of our BRC members enter. Oh, there we go. Perfect. Okay. As part of it too, as we're looking at all the options, we do want to evaluate them based on a set of criteria. So in our AP, we have a number of criteria that we'll be discussing briefly tonight. And then every option, we have to look with those lens on those criteria. So whether it's proximity to school, balance of enrollment, things like that. We'll get into more detail. So that will be your roles and responsibilities. Be part of the consultation process. And the big thing is just, we want to do this through a consensus building. So we want to work together in order to get to the final recommendations that we'll present to the BRC. In terms of where we're at right now, we're at steps 2 and 3 of our administrative procedures. So step 1 and 2 is what we discussed earlier. We got board approval, we established a BRSC committee, and we determined what schools were going to be impacted and what process we're going to do. Now we're in the thick of it, which is going to be the review and development of options. There we go. Afterwards, we're going to present those options at a public information meeting, which right now we have tentatively scheduled at the end of November. That's going to be a live stream where everyone can attend live, and not in person, but in the virtual setting. There won't be an open mic session, but they'll be able to submit their questions via online form, and we'll be able to answer them live on the spot. Or they may also have the opportunity to submit the questions earlier, and then we can address them there if they can't make that evening. Once that's done, then we make those, the BRSC we'll meet again as a committee. We'll determine which options you want to present to the BRSC for consideration, which then that goes forward for review by the director and then the board of trustees. After everything's said and done, then we move on to integration committee, which is something that moves over to the administrative staff. And that's just to make sure that there's a smooth integration of the new students going to their new schools, or a smooth transition. And we can get into that later too, maybe not this evening, but further into the process as to exactly what that means. In terms of our review timing and scheduling, tonight's our first in-person meeting. As I mentioned, we've met as a steering committee twice already. The intent is that we're going to have probably another 3 meetings before we open up for a public information meeting on November 23rd, where I'm hoping we'll present 2, max 3 options. I don't want to have too many because you just end up kind of splitting the vote at that point. Like, we want to have kind of a good scoped number of options. After that, we'll have obviously the feedback form open so people can submit their comments on all of those options. We'll review it. We'll have 1, maybe 2 meetings as a BRC to review it, see if there's any minor tweaks we want to do to the options that we present to the community, and then you'll present whatever your preferred option or options are. And then depending on where the timing lines up, either we'll have this matter resolved at board for December. If we need a little bit more time, we'll take it. It might get pushed into January. So hopefully all is said and done. So anything that's impacting students for September 2024, at least they'll know before the big push for registration happens in January, February. That's the intent.
Brad?
Yep.
Just want to clarify, if there's a step in between it going to, it coming here for a final recommendation from the committee before it goes to board, and that is the director decides which recommendation to put forward. So the committee doesn't decide which recommendation goes forward, that's the director's job.
Yep, that's correct. Thank you, Amy. Communication-wise, same thing we talked about before. We have the website, we have the dedicated email. Any big messaging that we want to provide to the community, give them an update of where we're at or what's coming, or the public information meeting, for instance, we'll do it through School Messenger so everyone's notified. If there's anything you can do on top of that, just to let them know, hey, make sure that you're aware of the messaging, by all means, please do. We've also provided some displays in the schools themselves, so that there's a little sign that says this is what's going on. If you want to know more, here's the QR code that sends you right to the website. So we're trying to do more so people are aware. I know everyone gets inundated with a lot of communication, so we're hoping with this, no one's caught by surprise by this boundary review process. Yeah, and that's just more of the same. So part 2 is the how to read overview. So you got the materials in front of you tonight. In your binders, you've got the administrative procedure for boundary reviews. You'll have the walking webs, which we'll discuss in a second. And then you'll have the option pack, which will include your English boundaries, your French immersion boundaries, sorry. And then the enrollment numbers for each one of those options. So in terms of the option maps, what I do want to just point out is that what we've done in order to facilitate the process of developing new options, we've divided up the study area, which is comprised of all of your school catchment areas, into different zones. And those zones were created in such a way to respect some geographical boundaries where possible. So if we see like a large ravine, a big forested trail, a major arterial road, things that are like hard boundaries that, you know, provide a division of community where it's not like, oh, my next door neighbor's going to this school and, you know, my front door neighbor's going to that school. We're trying to make it in such a way where it makes sense. And the intent through this process is that as we're going through it, it's easier for you to communicate, well, what if we did this option, but we added in zone D? What does that look like in terms of the numbers? Or what if I said, let's make Oakville number 3 zones T, B, and U? And then that way planning services can go back and then combine those zones as projections, which each one has specific student numbers associated to them based on their existing community who's there now and based on development. And then we can develop a projection based on that. So that's a way that's easier for us to communicate how we're going to be combining them together to create options. Any questions on that one? If any questions come up along the way, by all means, throw your hands up. We can discuss them. The next one is the boundary maps themselves. So this is where we're visually displaying what the catchment areas are for each schools, and those are represented by the colors. So in this instance here, the I guess green, that would be the proposed boundary for Oakville number 5. So whatever area falls within that, that's where students attending the English track program will be attending. When we have a change in boundaries, so here if I were to maybe highlight zone H, this represents that the background color is yellow, so that will be going, it's proposed to go to Udanawi, and its originating zone is brown, so that would be Dr. David R. Williams. So we're trying to graphically display where the zone came from as well as where it's going. Any questions on this one? Okay. These are the transportation maps. So we have 2 types here. We have one that's as the crow flies. So that's more just of a buffer distance. This is because we don't have roads for Oakville number 3 and Oakville number 5 yet. So we can't do like Google would do like a network analysis to determine the walk distance. So here we're just applying the 1.6 kilometer buffer. The deeper the hue, the more accurate it is. The lighter the hue, the less accurate it is. So as you get to the periphery here, you know, it's a little bit harder to tell whether or not they're going to be walked to or if they're going to be transported. And then the alternate to that is when we do have a road network available, what we do is we use the same methodology as our transportation consortium does. We take the property line and we extend a line from the furthest corner of that property line and we follow the street network. And once we hit 1.6 kilometers, which for the elementary panel is our walk distance, that's where it would stop. We do also trim these so that if there's an exception area, so an exception area is an area where we don't expect a junior kindergarten student or any elementary student to cross an arterial road. So it may extend beyond 1.6 kilometers, but they wouldn't be walkers because there's a barrier there. So that's how those are measured. So if you see like on Google, oh, that one actually extends beyond 6th line here. Yes, in terms of distance, but in terms of eligibility, we've cut it off because it's not actually the reality of it. On this? All right. This is where it gets fun. This is where Maureen's craft comes into play. These are the enrollment projections for every one of our schools that we provide. So every option, we do a projection for that school, and we divvy it up between the English program as well as the French immersion program. So if I'm to break this down into different pieces, so yeah, that's the one. On the left-hand side here, you'll have the name of the school. They'll have the on-the-ground capacity of the school. So what that means is the capacity, the built capacity of the facility as to how many students it can fit within bricks and mortar. Afterwards, you've got the maximum number of portables and the portable capacity. Excuse me, which is what we use to calculate the total capacity. So what that is, that's kind of the red line, where you can't pass that. Beyond that, that's where you get in a situation where I can't add any more portables and the school's reached its maximum capacity. And that's where things like other boundary reviews, temporary redirections, and things of that nature come into play. So that's what we're trying to avoid, and we'll get into that in a second. Afterwards, the programs are all listed here, as well as the number of students for each one of those programs for the term of the projection. We provide a 10-year projection. Pardon me. And then afterwards, at the bottom here, we provide the percent utilization. So that is based on not the max capacity of the school, but the built capacity. So it's the total number of students divided by the size of the school. That gives you a ratio. If it's 100%, that means everybody's within the building. Beyond 100%, they're in portables. That can vary. Sometimes 95, you're full, but I won't get into that right now. And then the bottom here is the number of portables we're expecting on site. So what we've done for that is we look at how much surplus or excess capacity do we have, or how much capacity are we missing. So if we've got 100 kids that are over the built capacity of the school, we divide that by 23, and that gives us plus or minus 4 portables on site. Now, in terms of the color coding, we're kind of using that to give you a visual representation of what to expect. Green is good. Yellow means that you're getting kind of near that caution area where you might be getting close to that maximum portable capacity. And if you hit red, that's kind of the indicator that, okay, you've passed maximum capacity. That either means that we need another action. Does that mean opening a new school, doing another boundary review? Or does it mean that the option is just not viable then because it's too soon? We don't have a response to that overage capacity. Any questions on this one? This is the heavy one. I know it's a lot. Jessica?
The question, the numbers that we have as the status quo,
Mm-hmm.
are those as of September 30 post shuffling that would have happened in the first month of the semester?
I believe we used September.
I believe it was mid-September. It wasn't, it was,
September 25th, I think we used.
It says updated September 28th.
Thank you, Amy. So that was the latest update. So post shuffle, you mean shuffling in terms of the reorganization of classrooms?
Yes, and the registrations that can happen in early September.
Yeah, so those ones, and a lot of times we see a lot of ups and downs on the September. So yeah, it takes into account that. And then we've definitely been monitoring it over time between now and October. Usually October 31st are good head count. That's what we use for the ministry. In this case, we don't see much of a variance between the end of September to the end of October, or not something that's material that would throw these off. If there was anything, we would have adjusted.
And I have one more question. The location of the North Oakville Elementary number 5, is that confirmed or is that still projected?
It's confirmed. So we have a site that's designated. It's within 2 developers right now. We're aware of it. We're just working through the acquisition process of the lands. We do have, I might as well get into it. We do have an architect engaged for it already. They were doing a repeat design of Oakville number 3. So the design's already underway. We're working with the town in terms of advancing that as quickly as possible. So the second we can have access to the site, we're hoping to put the shovel in and get going as soon as possible. So yes, we do have a site designated. And we'll get into the assumptions of timing as to when we're going to open or planning to open that school. Best case scenario, which we've had a couple changes.
So I have a question here. In our current capacity, it says that DDW's maximum portables are 18.
Yes.
We're at 24.
I know.
And the reason I'm saying
It's a
that
good question.
is our total capacity says of DDW is 792. What's projected for, and Udanavi was at 762. What's projected for the new school number 3 is 788. And the number 5 is 926. My concern here is that based on your other numbers or projections with the boundary reviews, we're still doing what? happened with Udunawi and DDW.
We're not supposed to talk about specific options yet.
No, not options, any option. I'm just wanting to understand the capacity
How
of
we
the new
determine
school.
capacity.
Like, why are they still so less? Like, why haven't we built bigger new schools? Because if you look at any of their options, they are like going red very soon.
I'm going to pin that question because it's a
Okay.
very good one, and we're going to get into it, and I'll show you, because right now I got to dive right into
Sure.
the presentation, but you'll see where the enrollment curve comes. And the answer to that in short right now is that you'll see a peak and then you'll see a drop. Do we have Palermo here today? Not to pick on Palermo. Palermo is a good example where we peaked and now we're at 60% utilization 10 years after the fact. So what we're trying to do when we're determining the size of our school facilities is try to build it for not the peak yields of how many students we anticipate, but more as to what we're going to be seeing in 10 years after the big flood comes through, where we're going to be. So that's why, Dr. David R., to your point, I want to make this clarification for Dr. David R. You have 24 on site. I don't want that to be a reality moving forward. I think 24 was what we did to make sure that your community was the least amount impacted. We tried to hold off on that redirection as long as we could. Hopefully, by the time we opened number 3, that didn't happen, so we had to do the redirection. So that was more not what I want for that site. 18, I think, is comfortable enough. 12, I think, is optimal, but that's why it's not 24 on site, because as you probably know very well, it's not a good situation to be in, and we don't want that to continue.
It's not that bad. The
No, okay.
max capacity, so the max capacity is based on 18 portables, not 24.
Correct. Yeah, that's how we want to move forward. 24 is too much for elementary. I'd say 18 is where you want to cut it. Any other questions on this? Oh, sorry, Amy.
Just want to add that with portables, you don't get more bathrooms, you don't get near the gym. You know, you lose the playground. And so, yeah, I lived through 18 portables at one of my schools for a couple of years. And 18 was more than enough, thank you very much. What are you looking for?
Oh, absolutely. I'm just concerned why it doesn't say 24 here.
Oh, okay.
Because that's the current status. It still says 18, which is misguiding. Because we have 23 classrooms existing right now.
Absolutely. 24.
So, yeah, well, 24 portables in place, yes.
Because they only want us to have.
No, I know, but if this is current status,
Yeah.
so it should show what's there, because that would really depict how badly we're being affected.
That's a fair thing for the status quo, yes. But yeah, the intent is we don't want you to be at 24 because
Yeah.
it's just, there's more of a, we'll do it now to like try to make it in time for Oakville 3. Didn't happen. So moving forward, 18 is the max. Any other ones on that? All right. Moving forward. Now, thankfully, we're not going to, when we're looking at enrollment numbers for all of our schools in the presentation, both for your sake as well as the community's sake, we're not going to be showing you the numbers like that because it's going to be hard to visualize. So what we do is we have bar graphs, and I'm just going to break down what the bar graph represents. So it takes what we just discussed and visualizes it. So it's a lot easier just to get through the cues as to what it means. So we've got our typical bar graph, and we have 2 lines. The gray line represents the bricks and mortar built capacity of the school. So like we discussed, like what we built the school to. So Oakville number 3 as an example, 788 places. The red line is kind of the do not pass go. That's where the maximum capacity of the school is. So when we're visualizing these options for every one of the schools, if we're surpassing that, that's an indicator of we either need to do something or the option isn't feasible. The next piece on the bottom, this demonstrates the number of portables, so then we can kind of translate that max capacity to how many portables we have. And again, same concept as the numbers. If we're getting close to the maximum, we'll indicate that in yellow. If we're well below, it's going to be green. Anything beyond it, it's red. So red is bad.
Just a question because of the examples you just gave. So since it says here 18, which is what's going to show on the bar graph, but in reality it's already 24. What are we going to be seeing?
You're going to be seeing 18 for the options, because moving forward, we like 24 is causing us some administrative as well as some operational issues. So we don't want to move forward with that. So as we resolve this issue, we don't want to have 24 as the maximum. So we're just going to say it's going to be 18 moving forward as to where the ideal situation is going to be with whatever option we have.
So it's just going to show us that the school has reached its maximum, not surpassed it.
Depending on the options. Yeah, so we'll see when we get to those options. Good question. This is what it's going to look like when we have the numbers. So a few things. So the bar graphs represent the enrollment. The number up top is the actual number of head count that relates to the charts. If it breaches, we'll we'll show you via a little box on top of it. I don't know if we show it here. No, we don't. The other thing I would want to do too is we would also show along the path if there is any intervention that's happening along the way, like the opening of a new school or if it's an action that's taking place, we'll present it. So if you're seeing that it hits over capacity, let's call it for 2028, for instance, but then we have a school that's opening in 2027, which will trigger a boundary review and a new school opening. At least we know that, yes, down the way, it becomes an issue, but before that happens, we have a response to it. So that way it shows that, yes, the option is still feasible, yet we have to be aware that something needs to happen. That was a lot. We still good? Mm-hmm. Wonderful. For those online, everyone's still doing okay? Andrew, keeping up?
Still good, yep.
All right. Let me know if it's not coming through very well, all right?
Oh, it sounds great right now.
All right. Boundary review study areas, so we'll go into detail on this. But one thing I did want to talk about is, well, we all know what schools are involved, our holding areas. So right now, as the status quo boundaries are set out, there's a lot of holding areas. What does that mean? That means there's geographic areas within the current catchment areas that don't necessarily, that's not where we want them to be in the future. So that was a great example we provided earlier as to what your current situation is you're attending River Oaks, but you're in North Oakville. So you're holding at River Oaks until such a time the school that's designated for your area is going to open, which is, we don't know yet, but that's technically you're holding. So we have a number of holding areas in the current boundaries that we want to address as part of this review so that we're not saying they're holding anymore. You have a school, you know where you're going to. You might be holding at the school that you are at now, but you know where you're going to be going. It's not indefinite. So that way we can give some certainty to the community, especially those that are going to be moving into the east of Trafalgar area as well as north of Preserve. As they're moving in, we could say, you're going to be in the Oakville number 5 boundary. You're just going to be holding at this school for the time being. So then there's a little bit more certainty and not a, well, I don't know where we're going to go. We have to go through a process. It's done. We know what's happening.
Are we only doing public schools or high schools as well?
Just elementary. High school is going to be a whole other process.
Okay.
So there might be some, and that's a good question too. So there might be some misalignment in terms of cohorts. So we might have some grade 8s that don't necessarily go to the same school. But I think at the present time, everybody in North Oakville is designated to WASP, but a portion, especially the new growth area that's outside of Boudinau and Dr. David R., is being redirected to T. Blake Block right now until the new high school opens. I don't want to get into that tonight.
Okay.
But good question. So just elementary on this one. In terms of growth areas, a lot of this is perpetuated by the fact we have a significant amount of growth in the North Oakville secondary plan. So that's kind of the last bastion of growth that's happening, greenfield growth that's happening in Oakville right now. So there's going to be a lot of that going on, which is triggering the need for a number of schools. So right now we've got 2 that are ministry funded, Oakville number 3 and Oakville number 5. Oakville number 3, we're in the ground. We're getting to the top edge of the first story. We're hoping to open for September 2024. Oakville number 5, we're still in the planning stages, but we're working with municipal approval and whatnot to get that thing going as quickly as possible. We also have a lot of intensification areas, so the uptown core and the post corners. There's a lot of high density development going through in kind of the peripheries of that. And there's also some high density growth happening in Palermo Village. So all of that's being thrown into the mixers to develop these numbers. And in terms of how many units are there going to be, how many kids do we expect per unit and the type of unit, low density, medium density, high density, which we're seeing a lot more of now. And we put all that to develop projections. All right, options. So I think if you want, we'll go through kind of the front end of this. We'll do status quo. And if you want, maybe we'll take a 5-10 minute break and then we can jump right back into it just for if anybody needs to take a couple seconds. As I mentioned earlier, as we're developing these options and what part of the work we're going to be doing next week is we want to rate these options based on criteria of what's most important to us as a community. So we have a number of them that are identified in the administrative procedure of the board. There could be other ones we add in if we want to, but these are pretty all-encompassing. So I'll go through them. There's the viability of the program. Here I'm not too worried because we have quite a bit of growth in the number of students, but the intent behind that is, do we have enough students so that the program's large enough so we're not having a number of split classrooms or it's too small of a student population. We want to make sure whatever we're doing, we have a substantial population of at least 2 classrooms per grade or what have you. So that's usually what we look at there. Stable long-term boundaries, that is one that I think is very important as part of this boundary. We've heard a little bit in terms of your presentation of what your current situation is you've been moved around a lot. We're trying to create boundaries that are as stable as possible so that we're not having to do this, more than once every 5 years. If we have to, then sometimes if we need to, but we want to do something that, we're kind of future-proofing ourselves for as long as possible. And if change has to come, then people know when it's coming and they're aware of it. Temporary accommodations, well, we have to judge that based on, how many portables are we using? Are we maybe overextending ourselves in one area while we have a number of surplus spaces in another? Can we balance that out? Which that also ties into the balance of overall enrollment. Are we trying to balance everybody out? Are we having schools that are too small and schools that are too large? Can we just kind of balance everything else so everyone's at a comfortable utilization and population? The fiscal sustainability, that one is, are we avoiding, too large schools? Are we avoiding use of transportation where possible, portable, things like that? And ties into the other ones as well. The geographic areas and barriers. So that's part of developing what I like to call more like a neighborhood school model where, usually you have your community area, which is your school, and the center of the community, everybody hope walks to. And then, it's in a walkable area. You're not having to travel across town to get to your school. Like ideally, that's what we're trying to achieve is a good geography where there's a connection to that. It's not always possible, but it's something that we're striving for. Transportation requirement ties well to that as well. Is if you can walk to your school, then that's a good size. And where you can avoid it, if you can avoid transportation by creating boundaries where, if you can walk, then how about we make you, or not make you, but, give you the opportunity to walk to school as opposed to having to transport you somewhere distant. And then student experience. The big one there is stability, making sure that we're not moving you multiple times. If you have been moved just recently, let's avoid moving you again. And that's the kind of thing we want to be discussing. So we'll be reviewing all of those next week and then kind of telling us or discussing amongst ourselves which ones we find most important or best relates to our school community, or are they all equal?
Can I raise one additional one?
You can bring it up now, but we'll talk more about
Talk
next
about it
week.
next week, okay.
Yeah.
I just think there's something missing on that list, but we can talk about it.
Awesome. In terms of scenario assumptions, we're assuming that Oakville number 3 opens next September. We're tight on that. I'll be honest with you, we're tight, but we're hopeful that that will happen. Oakville number 5, we were planning for September 2025, but things are kind of slowing down in terms of growth in North Oakville right now. The housing market that is and all that. So things might be delayed by a year on that one. I wouldn't be surprised. The nice thing about that one is that it's kind of central to the community that's being built. The community is not being built. The student pressures aren't necessarily there. So the school's not needed as direly. Not the case with Oakville 3. For future school openings, we have Oakville number 4 and Oakville number 6. Oakville number 4, we're planning for September 2030. And Oakville number 6 is for 2033 and beyond. So you'll see those kind of pop up as we look at the options. When we did these numbers, as you're aware, we do have temporary relocation of students happening right now, where a portion of Dr. David R. Williams and Post Corner students are going to Palermo. We've brought them back to their schools to do the projections because that's their home school. So that's been addressed. All of our boundary options.
But these aren't current numbers then? They're Palmero students added into the numbers?
The students that belong to Post Corners and the students that belong to Dr. David R. Williams, which are in their catchment, we brought them out of Palermo and put them back in their
And so those numbers are reflected in there? Okay.
Yes. So that way we're not assuming let's go. And it's overstated at Palermo or understated at Dr. David R. That's the number of students that are within that boundary. Any option we're presenting, we assume the grade 8 students are remaining at their home school, so that way they can finish off their last year. In all of these options, I'll say this, we're not creating UFI programs north of Dundas, and we'll get into that in a few. And in all the options, we are having to deal with the over accommodation issues at Post Corners. That's something that we need to deal with as part of this review. So an option, whatever it may be, that's some pressure we need to deal with regardless of what the boundary is. It needs to be dealt with. The 4 options I have for you tonight, we'll go through status quo, but the 4 other options, I have 4 of them. One is a control option. This one, I'll tell you right now, isn't viable. But what I do want to show you as part of this is that keeping the French immersion program as it is, or the French immersion boundaries as they are in North Oakville, it doesn't work. There's too many challenges and there's too many students. So I want to show you what that looked like so I can demonstrate it. And then option 2 to 4 are those ones where we start making options that are feasible. So option 2, what we do is we reduce FI, the boundary for Dr. David R. Williams, to just its English track boundary and send some French immersion down. And for options 3 and 4, we send all the French immersion from the north down to south of Dundas. All right, so we're going to go through the first round of boundaries, and then we'll go through the 4 options after a quick little break. And yeah, everyone good with that? Good. All right, so for the status quo boundaries in terms of describing them, Palermo right now extends, you've got the northwest Oakville secondary plan area. Most of that is, there's some high density going on over here, some development, and then a lot of this is industrial or, mostly industrial uses or office. This is their kind of built up boundary that they have right now. There's not much more going on there. They're built out and they're declining enrollment. See that in a second. River Oaks, this is their established, I might say, their established boundary. And anything beyond north of Dundas in these areas in red here, that's what I would call the holding areas right now. Those are students that are holding at River Oaks until our new schools are open or until the boundary review is established. That's where they should go. Udanawi is represented here in yellow. There's a portion of preserve that's currently going to Dr. David R. Williams. Dr. David R. Williams right now is, this is more of its established boundary, and I would say this area here is holding at Dr. David R. for the moment. Eventually, Oakville number 5 is going to be in this area, so we have to consider that as part of our options. Falgarwood down here is currently holding all of this area in North Oakville. There are some Falgarwood students in this area too, so there's a little bit of a dual holding situation going on there because of just capacity issues. And then Post Corners is represented down here in blue. In terms of the FI boundaries, right now Palermo is a dual track school, so it has the FI program as well, and its FI boundary is the same as its English boundary. Forest Trail is represented here in green. We have this whole area in purple, that is Sunningdale's boundary, which is also holding or has quite a bit of North Oakville within it. The brown is Dr. David R's boundary right now for French immersion, so they're taking on a lot of students from Udanawi, which is contributing to why their growth is accelerated, because they're taking a lot of kids from outside of their established boundary, their English track boundary, their established boundary. And then the blue area here is Munns. And north of Dundas right now is where they're holding a lot of the FI kids that are in North Oakville. So they're currently going down to Munns east of Falgar. In terms of numbers, Dr. David R. So yes, to the point, we're above capacity on in this scenario here throughout. We're continuing to see growth. There's still some more areas within Dr. David R. Williams that are being built out, so further north, as well as all of Oakville 5 is contained within these numbers. So we have to send that to Oakville 5, as well as address other accommodation issues of their current enrollment that's at that school. Falgarwood right here, again, because it is a holding school. Right now, they're just below their max capacity, but by 2025, they will be going past or reaching it. They are holding for Oakville number 3, so hopefully we do have Oakville number 3 open by 2024 or before 2025, before the growth continues on. Forest Trail at this moment, they're well below their capacity, so they have quite a bit of room to accommodate students at this moment without the need for portables, and their max capacity is nowhere near reached. Munns right now, this is their projected enrollments. They're projected to go slightly above capacity, and this is taking on all of the north areas. Their whole holding area of new development, they're fitting in quite comfortably within their existing facility. Udanawi, and I want to go back to the earlier question, thank you, about the progression of community. So Udanawi, to your point, when it opened, we reached all the way up to 18 portables, and now we're back down to 12. So this is what we were kind of talking about, is we had this big peak when the school initially opened as it was ramping up. And now what we're seeing is as the neighborhood's stabilizing, we're seeing a little bit more of a decline in that enrollment to where we want them to be, which is within that built boundary of the school. So ideally, a school, we want it to be between, like, I'd say 90 to 110%. At 90%, I'd say you're pretty much full. Maybe not all your classrooms are maxed out to the max loading, but every classroom is filled with some students. At 110, we might have a few portables on site, that's fine. But anything beyond that, then it gets a little bit too much. So that's why we don't want to overbuild, because we get in a situation then where we have too many empty spaces, and that creates issues with the board as a whole in terms of operations. We end up spending money on empty spaces as opposed to on our students and the services that we need to give to them. So that's the biggest reason as to why we're not building these large schools at like this level here, is because 10 years down the road, we might have a lot of empty space. So in an example here, you're going to have 100 empty space, and that'll continue on. And some schools are more rapid in terms of their deployment. So that's why we don't overbuild. And we use portables as kind of that temporary holding until such a time things settle down, and then we adjust. And we get into the next cycle, which is school closures, but thankfully we're not talking about this here today. Complete opposite issue. Palermo is another example. So this is more aggressive decline like I talked about earlier. Palermo, if we were to look back here in the early 2010s, we were above capacity, and now that's dropped quite significantly. And this is the kind of thing we want to avoid, is a lot of that surplus space, because then we don't have a use for it. Post quarters, in terms of the status quo right now, we're above our max capacity. We've had to implement a redirection already because we've hit that max. So some of these kids are going to Palermo. So this is something we need to address. We have quite a bit of overutilization here. We're using the library right now as a classroom. It's not ideal. We need to resolve this issue. River Oaks, again, this is a holding area at the moment. So right now they're just at the cusp. They're holding a lot of Oakville number 3 students. And we need to address this issue sooner rather than later, because they're continuing to see growth along the way. So we want to alleviate some of that pressure. Sunningdale right now, and accommodating the North Oakville area, they're also doing so in a comfortable fashion with what they are. So they're doing okay right now in terms of utilization. And that's it for the current boundaries. Any questions on those before we break for 5 minutes? All right, so maybe let's do a 5-minute break, and then we'll get back at 8:05 and finish off the last 3 options and talk about next steps. All right, I'm going to thank Claire for getting us all back on track. All right, so we're kicking off with option number 1 right now. And as you recall, this is the control. So this is boundaries as they are now for FI in the north, and just to show like what the issues are with it. Okay, so in this situation here, what we're showing is we are like getting rid of some of the holding areas and sending them to school. So in this case here for Falderwood, we've got we're establishing the Oakville number 3 boundary, which encompasses this whole area here, which has a lot of growth in it. I also want to demonstrate that tonight. Dr. David R. Williams here, we are going to be dividing that boundary up. So the area north here for Oakville number 5 is going to be sent to Oakville number 5. Zone H here, which is just north of Udinawi, so that's part of the preserve development. They're going to be redirected to Udinawi now that it has a little bit more space. All of the River Oaks area here, I'll go through the zones. Zones B, C, D, E, F, K, O, P. They're currently all holding at River Oaks. That's going to now be the Oakville number 5 boundary. Dr. David R. Williams is left with zones M, N, and L. This area here, that's currently holding at River Oaks. So that's known as the Upper Oaks community, but it's just between Trafalgar and that 8th line. They're going to go from River Oaks and be sent over to Oakville number 3. And then last but not least, post corners over here. Everything west of 6th line, as well as this little pocket here, referred to as I think that's AJ. We're sending that over to River Oaks. Now, post corners will be contained within Trafalgar to the east, 6th line mostly to the west, with Upper Mill to the south. And then Falgarwood afterwards will just be its established boundary without holding. In terms of the FI, and this is where I want to demonstrate what happens when we don't touch FI, Dr. David R. Williams, even though we've removed a lot of growth that's being directed towards it and sent it to Udinawi as well as the new Oakville number 5. We're still not doing enough, and I'll show you that in a minute. So we're still taking, 5 minutes here. We're still taking on a substantial number of grade 1 students from Udinawi that are going to grade 2 FI, about 50% of them. And that's what's contributing to the fast and rapid growth of Dr. David R. Williams. And then Oakville number 5 here. The Oakville number 5 area here will be directed to Forest Trail. Palermo's FI boundary remains unchanged. Sunningdale unchanged. And Munns, instead of now holding in the north, essentially now it's just going to be their boundary for FI, because right now they can hold the students well. In terms of Oakville number 3, as you recall, we're taking on all the growth east of Trafalgar, over to it, and that's a lot of growth. That's where our other planned school, Oakville number 4, is going to be located. But in this scenario here, we're going to be surpassing our maximum capacity by 2028. But I don't expect Oakville number 4 to be open before 2030. So in this scenario, this is just an example, this option isn't viable because I don't have a solution here, which means I'd have to trigger a boundary review or I'd have to trigger a redirection and wait for Oakville 4. Doesn't quite align with that neighborhood stability thing I was mentioning earlier. Oakville number 5, based on its boundary here, we're good for the long term. So here we're growing all the way to the max capacity in 2032, and by that time we have Oakville number 4 that's opening, and on its coattails we have Oakville number 6. So here we've got some solutions to address that pressure. One thing I want to go back to real quick too is Oakville number 5 right now, we're approved by the Ministry of, forgot to mention this, for 788 pupil places. Tomorrow we are submitting business cases to increase that to 926 because we're missing a few schools in North Oakville based on our latest projections. We're going to try to increase that. If we're not successful, then we're going to have to have a look at this. So we're mindful of that as we're going through the process.
Sorry, so could you repeat that? So technically right now it's not 926?
It's planned for 788, but we're designing it for 926 to get the ministry approval to uplift it, and the ministry recognizes the amount of growth that's there. So we're very hopeful, and we think it's positive. But if we don't, then we'll be able to address it still as part of this review. Dr. David R. Williams here. This is where I want to show you what's happening. So even with moving some of that area out to Udinawi to try to take some of the pressures off, we're still going to be in a high portable situation for the long term. So we dipped down from 24 down to 21, 18, and then we're right back up past the 24 portable mark at Dr. David R. Williams if we leave the FI as it is, or we have to start cutting into the English track boundary in terms of reducing the number of students there, of existing students, not growth. That would be existing. So that's to demonstrate that we're still having quite a bit of pressure on Dr. David R. Williams. With the removal of holding, Balderwood dips down quite a bit. So once Oakville number 3 opens, that just kind of goes right down in terms of enrollment. So there's opportunity to do something here, but at the end of the day, it is an aging community. So that's another issue we have to deal with, another process. With the inclusion of more FI students from the north at Forest Trails, they're still well below their OTG, so they're still faring well. Munns right now, again, the holding area that's north of Dundas, that's FI, now being just the FI area for Munns, it's managing well. Udinawi with the additional students, this one remains pretty much unchanged throughout all the options, so I won't repeat it over and over again, but with that zone H going towards it, it's got a comfortable range long term. Palermo, we have a lot of opportunity here to do something with that excess space. Is it regular track, the English track, or the FI? Is it both? Expanding on that. Post corners here with the relocation of those students that we saw earlier in those 2 zones west of 6th line. We managed to dip down the portables from 12 right now and surpassing the max capacity. And we've got 6 to 8 portables on site. So we've got about 4 spaces left for portables. We don't want to get there, but at least we're in a decent range. Not uncommon to have that many portables at Halton. River Oaks, though, and looking at it, I think there's still some opportunity here to add some more growth to River Oaks. With the removal of all the holding areas, we are taking a substantial number of students away. And even with the inclusion of that area from post corners, there's still some excess space we can take advantage of here. The reason I've got Oakville number 5 highlighted in both here is because we're still on the cusp, but it's looking like that's going to transition into a 2026 opening. Sunningdale's doing well in these boundaries as well. Still some opportunity to take on some more FI kids with that excess space. Any questions on option 1? All right, moving on to option 2. So this is just still some FI in the north, but we're reducing the amount, specifically at Dr. David R. Williams. So here for the English tract boundary, I'm going to start with start from the west, work my way to the east. Here, what we're doing now is we're including Zone B, Matabee development right over here, just west of the creek, where that big overpass, where the big ravine is. So we'd be directing them over to Palermo. Oakville number 5, same zone, but we'd be giving them C, D, E, F, K, O, P, I, J. I, J is from Dr. David R. Williams. The other zones are all from River Oaks. For Dr. David R. Williams, it's English tract boundary, just those the 2 zones I just mentioned, as well as the one that's going to Unawi. For the Oakville number 3 boundary here, what we're doing is, if you recall in option 1, you had still a lot of growth coming in and we were blasting to the max capacity too soon. So here what we're doing is, you know what, we're going to keep zones R, U, V, W, S in Falderwood. They'll continue holding there. And these zones here, they're not planning to be built yet. We don't have development applications for them yet. So that means that eventually when they do come, we'll continue holding at Falderwood. However, the vast majority of those that are within the Upper Oaks existing community here between 6th line and Frogger and 8th line, as well as everything that's been developed both in the Argo and the Matabee development here just north of Dundas, east of 8th line. That community there will be going to Oakville number 3. So as that gets built out, that'll make up part of the Oakville 3 boundary. In terms of post corners, same song and dance here, AE and AJ, we're sending them over to River Oaks. As we mentioned earlier, we want to go a little bit further with that because we had a lot of excess space. So now we're looking at the zone AH here, which is there's a lot of high density growth that's being contemplated there. And I'm trying to see, this is all Falderwood too. That's the next option. Yeah, XYZ, that's
XYZ is Falderwood, yes.
Falderwood stuff, okay, perfect. So that over here, that's currently going to River Oaks. It's all new development, high density. No one's there yet, but we'll keep them at Falderwood for the time. FI wise here, the big change is we're sending Unawi, which in option 1 was still going to Dr. David R. Williams. Now we're sending them over to Forest Trail. So that way the only remaining FI school in North Oakville would be the Dr. David R. Williams English tract boundary, which would also be its FI boundary. So that thing I mentioned earlier about taking on students outside of this boundary that is accelerating its growth, now it's just its own kids. So whether it's 60% of students or 20% of students taking FI, same number of kids, same number of classrooms, it doesn't have the same impact. Any questions? Sorry, Tanya. Okay.
So I have a question on the post corner situation. In both option 1 and 2, in 2024, why is post corners going into red? Like what is affecting them?
I'll have a look at it in a second after the FI stuff. I might have to have Lillian help me with that. Munns remains the same, and Sunningdale here, we're adding more FI students over to Palermo, and Forest Trail is taking on the Dr. David R. Williams as well as some of the Forest Trail area just to up its numbers. So right away with Oakville number 3 and making a little bit more of that tighter boundary there, that's just what's being developed right now. We're not hitting max capacity. And even with the opening of Oakville 4, which is all the stuff that is holding for Trafalgar, we may have an opportunity there to redirect some of those pressures, but we don't need to. So we can have a pretty established boundary for the long term in this area and not having to do this over again. For Oakville number 5, way down the line, when in 2033, that's when it surpasses max capacity, but we have 2 solutions here. We got Oakville number 4 and Oakville number 6. So here we have a resolution to that max capacity when it surpasses it. So this isn't much of a concern. Dr. David R. Williams, with the removal of some of that FI, we managed to really dip down the overall numbers. So that's helpful. And then over here, we do have an uptick down the way, and that's that top right corner there, Dr. David R. Williams. That's planned development. So that's still going to come down the road. And ideally, Oakville number 4, which highlighted here, Oakville number 4 is going to be looking at 2030 openings, so that's just across the way from it, so that'll be part of the discussion then. Falgarwood, again, we're taking on all that growth. Again, it's going to be surpassing max capacity in 2030, so Oakville number 4 aligns with that, so we have a solution there. Forest Trail, with the inclusion of additional FI kids, now we're at the capacity and we're going to be within a couple portables, so we're comfortable here. Munns, again, nothing changed with Munns. It's the same students going to it for FI. Udinawi, nothing changes from option 1 and 2, so they're still comfortable. Palermo, with adding additional FI students as well as adding that little bit of development there, we're uplifting its numbers so that it's not necessarily full, but it's doing a lot better in terms of utilization. So we're getting close to that 80–90% range that we want to be in. Post quarters here in 2024, we're still looking at being right at the cusp there. And then we drop when we establish the boundary.
So I could talk to that.
Yeah, please.
So the reason why Post Corners does that is that, so for 2024, I made the assumption that all the redirected students from Post Corners will be returning back from Palermo to Post Corners. So that would initially bump up the numbers. And then in terms of the boundary change between Post Corners and Rogues, that would not take place until 2025 because that is when number 5 will open. So Post Corners will keep on have its own boundary as it is right now, but the implementation of that proposed boundary change in option 2 won't take place until number 5 opens. Because then River Oaks has much more room to be freed up, and then those students can transfer over to River Oaks. I see puzzled looks over there.
So if, say for example, option 2 is chosen,
Yes,
that means anyone who is going to Post Corners now, but are in an effective zone, still go to Post Corners until the school is built, or do they get moved to where?
so what would happen is that they are not going to number 5 because they're not in the boundary.
Yeah.
They did the boundary change through River Oaks and Post Corners.
Okay.
Yeah.
But this doesn't take effect until, you're saying the number drop doesn't take effect until the number 5 is built?
Yes, because that's when we have the proposal of having those Post Corners students transferring over to River Oaks to implement the new boundary. And the reason why 2024 is again in that red zone is that we made the assumption that those redirected students will be coming back from Palermo to Post Corners. It may be a point of discussion where maybe they stay at Palermo and not move to Post Corners at that time, not until 2025, until the number 5 opens, but that's probably something we brought up for discussion.
Just for that real quick, in terms of the redirection, the way that it's set up right now is the redirection for the students that are in that area of Post Corners. It's reviewed annually. So if at any time there is enough capacity to bring in the students that were redirected to Post Corners, it's the first out, first in approach, where if you were the first to leave to Palermo because of the surplus capacity, you'll be given the option to come back sooner. But to Lorraine's point, just because we're not sure where that's going to land, we just assumed everybody's going to come back for the numbers' sake. So the temporary redirection piece is going to have to be dealt with, outside of this. So this, albeit we might be at the max. Sorry. Albeit we might be at the max here with the redirection in place, that might still be a little bit lower than the maximum capacity. But we want to make sure all the students are in here. It's because this, like we said earlier, we made the assumption all the redirected students are back in, so we know what the total number of students are within the boundary. So this might still have a redirection in place at this time. We might not be able to take away a redirection in this option.
Because last June, we were up to 924 at Post Corners. So I'll follow up with you then.
Yes, you're probably correct.
Yes.
And those are pre-registration numbers.
Yep.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. I have the numbers in front of me, Lorraine, you guys.
Yeah.
All right, River Oaks with this one. So yeah, we see the increase here. So with the additional students that we're bringing in from the high density area, as well as the high density area, this kind of takes advantage of that and brings it up to its maximum. So we're taking advantage of that surplus space. Go. Sunningdale, again, we're doing okay here. We still have enough space to take on more students if possible. And that's option 2. Aside from the Post Corners question, we'll get back to you on that just to clarify. And any other questions with regards to the options?
Just one question. There's a Catholic school being built. It's not mentioned on there, but have you guys thought of the effect it's going to have on the number of students? Maybe some students are going there. I don't know.
Oh, that's a great question. No, Well, yes and no. I don't think it's going to change our assumptions because our yields are based on how many students we expect to capture from development. So that's somewhat baked into that analysis. And I say no as well because for Catholic school, for the elementary panel, you have to be a Catholic right holder.
Yes.
So there's that whole thing. And so for that, it's not like you can choose one or the other. You have to at least have, you have to be eligible to go to Catholic elementary. So it has less of a bearing here. When we're talking secondary, that's a whole other ballgame. But for this, we're pretty confident that it won't have an impact.
Okay.
Unless we have, students that are opting to go to public school instead of Catholic school, and they can, maybe we'll lose them in the interim, but that's usually the yields pick that up.
Okay.
It's 8:30.
Oh, wow. Are we good with, give me 10 minutes and I'll fly through the last two? Are we just gonna head down? I won't do a mental meeting for this one, I promise. Okay, let's fly through it, guys. Option 3, so going a little bit further here, a little bit of a variation. So again, we're sending, option 3, we're just removing FI. So really the English track boundaries are relatively the same. So let's go through that. Here, what we're doing now is Dr. David R. Williams, we're sending that over to Sunningdale entirely. So now in the north, we don't have FI anymore. We're sending everything to the south. And they're going to be accommodated at Sunningdale. All of Uden now, we know Oakville 5 area, Forest Trails, and Munns and Palermo remain unchanged from option 2.
Can I just ask a really quick question about sort of logic? If you go back to the previous scenario, which also existed, just the previous map.
Yeah.
The English map.
Yeah.
So just one ahead, one above the English map. Just want to understand the logic of why would AH is included with River Oaks, but why wouldn't it be a boundary that actually, like an area that actually borders on River Oaks, as opposed to on the other side?
So like AR is a bunch of condo buildings.
That's option 4. We'll get to that one.
Okay.
So to your point though, so this goes into they're kind of on the cusp of being transported. So it's one of those scenarios where you're going to be on a bus anyways.
Okay.
So, we can do River Oaks. The alternate option is looking at elsewhere where the growth can be.
Okay.
Also, this isn't developed yet, so we're not impacting existing students. So there's that aspect too.
And then also on all the FI maps, Munns and Sunningdale are color coded the same.
On the what?
On the FI maps, not this one, but the previous FI maps. Unless my eyes are bad. Munns and Sunningdale are color coded the same.
No, months and
Right? Munns
Yes,
is-
it sits on that.
Okay, I understand. So Munns is here, but the boundary's blue.
Oh, okay, it's
Yeah.
confusing because
It's just that no FI kid that lives near Munns is going.
just walking to Munns.
Yeah.
So you could look at Munns and go to Oakville, Munn Fire. Okay,
Oh.
you could be across the street from it and you're not going to that school.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's how it is.
That's correct. That is
I
what you
didn't
mean.
know that.
Yeah. Sorry, I keep mixing up the laser pointer and the other button. Yeah, now we're into option 3. Are we good on the maps for option 3?
So option 3, does that mean that Dr. David R. Williams will only be an English school then?
That's correct. So for both option 3 and 4, there's no more FI at Dr. David R. Williams. We're moving that side.
There's no FI anywhere in the north of Highway 5.
Yeah. So strictly
Everybody was bused.
Every kid north in North Oakville is bused.
For FI.
Choose FI, yeah.
Correct. Numbers wise, Oakville number 3, it's the same thing as Oakville option number 2. We're doing well overall. We won't hit max capacity. Oakville number 5, same thing. We're just down the road on hitting max capacity. Dr. David R. Williams, with the removal of FI, we're in a little bit more of a comfortable range now. Now we're just at, we max out at 13 portables, so we take a lot of that pressure off the site. For Falgarwood, we're in the same issue. We're still taking on a lot of holding, but we have a solution for Oakville number 4. Forest Trail, with the additional Dr. David R. Williams students, now we're right at capacity, it's the same as option 2. Munns is the same as option 1 and 2. Udenawi is the same. Palermo is the same. Post Corners is the same again. River Oaks, nothing changes. This is where the Dr. David R. Williams students that we sent over to Sunningdale, we've taken over that empty space. We're a little bit in portables, but we're at a comfortable range between, 2 to 3 portables long term. So now we've kind of balanced out that enrollment throughout all of the schools. And option number 4, it's a variation on option number 3. In this scenario here, we go a little bit further with Dr. David R. Williams, and we take some of the growth away, which is zone N. We send that over to Oakville number 5. And then over here, was mentioned earlier, why are we taking away AH, which is contiguous to post corners. Instead, now we're looking at zones Z, Y, and X. So this area here, that's a whole corridor of high density growth. So to top up River Oaks now, instead what we're doing is we're taking some of that growth away from what would be holding up Falgarwood, and we're sending it over to River Oaks, which would be on a bus anyway, to help out with the underutilization there long term. FI, the only thing that really changes here is then these zones here are now going to Sunningdale because they're part of that family of schools. Everything else remains the same. So again, Oakville number 3, unchanged. Oakville number 5, it speeds up its growth because we're taking some of that pressure away from Dr. David R. So that zone N there, that's just southwest of 6 Line Burnthorpe. They're being sent over to Oakville number 5 to help with that. Dr. David R. Williams now, we're taking a lot of that pressure off long term. So now we're just between that, 3 to 4 portables long term. So they're now in a comfortable state. Falgarwood, same thing. They're still going to have quite a bit of pressure long term, so we have to deal with that in the new school. Forest Trail, just above capacity. Munns, same thing. This is the usual. Now nothing changes. Palermo, nothing's changing. And Post Corners here, they're a little bit higher. We're not taking as much growth away from them because we're retaining that high development corner there. So they're still going to be in portables, probably 7 or 8 long term. So not quite taking it down as much as we could, but it's an alternate option. River Oaks, again, with the additional growth, they're right at their capacity, so we're addressing that empty space. Sunningdale, they are taking on more of that growth, so they're slightly higher than option 3 in terms of overall enrollment with the additional high density development there on top of the opportunity. So those are the options. So before I get into next steps and call it an evening, any questions on option 4? All right. All of your resources, we provided you links to the Google folder. So if you have any questions about that, email us. But what's in the Google folder will be all the maps, all the options, the tables, the walk webs, the minutes, and the PDF of the presentation. We'll place it all within there so that you can access it. And everything should be available at this time right now. In terms of our next steps, so our next meeting is on Thursday of next week. This will be virtual. And like I said earlier, this is where we're going to dig deep into these options and start having breakout sessions and discussing, okay, well, how do we feel about these options? How are they meeting the criteria, which is another exercise we'll be doing. And are there new options we want to look at? So that'll be part of the discussion next week, which is what this slide was. Any questions before we call it for an evening?
Do the next meetings have to be virtual? I wonder if it's going to be harder to communicate in that kind of roundtable discussion when we're not in person. I completely understand the convenience given everybody's schedules, but I just think if it's going to be more effective to be in person, then is it possible to perhaps hold a group, see if is it possible to use the space for that if we want to be in person instead?
I'm thinking this isn't the first time we're doing virtual.
Yeah.
So what we could do is let's give it a shot, because to your point, convenience wise, and I know there's babysitting, there's daycare, there's childcare. I got the same problem. Let's see how it goes. And it has been effective. We just there's a couple just meeting etiquette in terms of hands up and all that. But I think once you get into the groove of it, it has been pretty good. We did a big one in Milton similar to this with 2 new schools, and it was pretty well done. That was our first one. So I'd say let's give it a shot. And if we need it, then we can reassess at that point in time. Is that fair? I do appreciate that. Any other questions?
Did you say that one of the option 1 wasn't a viable one?
Yeah, option one was a control option, just to show you.
Show you how bad it is, so you don't pick it.
I was debating whether even to like call it an option, but I just want to go through the exercise that this is what happens when we just keep too much growth in an area, and what happens with Oakville number 3. And then the other thing I want to demonstrate is what happens when you have a full other school being directed for FI at a growth school in North Oakville, which just further accelerates the growth. So it was more of a demonstration to kind of bring you on side of where our perspective is and what's happening. And just for a discussion point too, just so that we can, you can see it. It's not just taking my word for it. There's numbers. All right.
With everything that our students have gone through with COVID, and they've arguably had the worst education in Ontario history for 3 years running. They've just now made connections. They've just now had stability. What is the board going to think about the students' mental health when it comes to grandfathering and making sure that we aren't just going around the table here? People were talking about, oh yeah, we got moved the last time. Oh yeah, we got moved again. What is the board going to do to make sure that we are, where it's possible, where it makes sense, that we grandfather all students who are able to be grandfathered, and they don't disrupt the social connections they've made. We don't disrupt their education, because I don't know how many of you board people have elementary school children. It's been hell. And we need to consider the mental health of students. And I don't know if this is considering the mental health of students, but I know we need to. So
What I
that's.
was saying, I think there's other variables that we need to consider aside from that list that was raised.
And I know parents have reached out to me about this. And I know they've talked to Kelly Amos as well. They've emailed trustees. This is a concern with the public where they just don't want to be placed somewhere where you're gonna have to move again. Or really it's going to affect a small group of children, but then they're gonna have to move, but it's really only affecting like a small group. So I just wanna know I know the board is very, well, this is the way we've done it. There's nothing more dangerous than saying, this is the way we've always done it. Are we going to think that we can grandfather, or are we just not even choosing that as an option?
Because the trustees are the ones that make the decision if we will grandparent as many students as possible. And we will do that in conjunction with working with the planning department, so that anyone who is eligible to stay, to keep the numbers within the boundaries so that no schools are going over max. That will be a goal, as long as we're still balancing those under-enrolled schools. We have to keep that in mind too, because when schools are under-enrolled, they have a different kind of pressure on them. They can't class build the same way. They don't have the critical mass in order to be able to build classrooms that are based on learning styles and put them with the appropriate teacher, because they don't have as many students and they don't have as many teachers. They also have split grades, and sometimes up to 3 grades in one split classroom. And that doesn't happen very often, but it's not optimal. And so we have to look at the mental health of all students, and trust me when I tell you, mental health is a huge thing. We talk about every single meeting, mental health. Not just for students, but also for staff, because the stress that staff went through, especially through COVID, many of our staff were required to be in the buildings. And at the start of COVID, you can remember how scary that was.
I'm an elementary school teacher myself. I was in the midst of it.
Okay, so
I
you
understand.
understand that. Yeah, so we have always grandparented as many students as possible. My own kids, my son, by the time he was in grade 5, had been in 6 schools. We moved once, and he ended up going to 6 different schools.
And that's a horrible situation.
And it
I
was
hope
a
that
horrible
doesn't happen
situation.
to anyone
We've gotten
else.
a lot better.
And I've already shared the concerns with the parents that have with planning, and they've already committed to looking at the grandparenting. And that's not where we are yet. We need to look at the possible scenarios before we can even start factoring in anything.
But it is an option that's not ruled out.
No, it's absolutely not ruled out. We grant.
And not just for
every
7 and 8
single-
though.
No, we grandparent in every single scenario that's ever been brought to the table. There's always to maximize grandparenting. The problem is when there's bursts of growth and multiple schools opening. I lived through this. I understand where you're coming from. I did, and I commiserate with every single one of you because it's horrible. You can watch it at both ends. The ward that I serve is a mix of old and new. Half of my schools are over 50, the other half of my schools are 10 or 12 years old. So I see it every single day. It's not even just in the capacity of the school, but the school condition, the facilities condition aren't the same. And you're trying to find balance so that every school is approximately receiving the same bells and whistles, while in classrooms of good size that we can support well. Some of my schools don't even have a vice principal because they don't have enough critical mass to warrant a vice principal. Single administrator schools, not a good thing. It's not a good thing at all. So we understand how difficult it is for parents going through these things. Trust me, we do. Sometimes it's unavoidable, but we do listen and we do make changes according to grandparenting that will help kids. And we all know that after coming through COVID and finally having some semblance of normalcy back in our schools, we all know that, the last thing we want to do right now is move kids. We also know we want 24 portables on site at one school and half capacity at another. These new schools are gonna open, so we have to put kids in them. We're hoping that you'll understand that we're human. We feel what you feel. We're not just saying, oh, this is the cookie cutter, this is how we do it. Cookie cutter has many shapes, and we do our best to make sure that we pick the right shape cookie cutter, and if we have to create a new one, we do.
So, I just want to further that. There are some strategies to your earlier point, so thanks, Amy, for all that. And that's kind of the perspective we have down the road. Like I said, after we go through the PIM, we review the options. That's when we start looking at, obviously that's something that's going to come up as part of the community wants. How much can we give? And it's weighing that. So yes, sometimes we can only do 8s and 7s. Recently we did, 2 grades for the Aldershot Boundary Review done. So it's part of it, but we need to make sure, to your earlier point too, is we need stability. And right now we don't have it in these areas, specifically, Post Corners in North Oakville, we don't have it. There's a lot of going, back and forth. There's redirections in place. I don't want to be doing this again anytime soon. I want to be doing it again when we're talking about Oakville 4. That's the next time I want to talk about this, or the high school. Let's not get into that tonight. Soon. I'm working on it, Kelly, I swear. But to your other point there, we do have that criteria in there, student well-being, mental health, that's part of it. And we do have strategies, even if let's say, and I'm not saying this is what's going to happen, but for argument's sake, there is no grandparenting or what we're going to call legacy exemption. But what we also do as strategies is, are we moving enough kids? Am I just moving one little pocket of that student and they're going to, Timbuktu or Palermo, and there's 5 kids and that's it, and they don't even know each other. We're not going to do that. We're looking at, if we're going to move students, we're going to move a substantial enough number of them so that they're going to have a familiar face. They're going to be able to go to a school together. They're going to, part of the transition committee work, and I'll tag in some of my colleagues, facilities or school superintendents, but we try to keep them in the same classrooms and make those concessions so we do have a good transition for these students so that they're best set up for success when they do move. It's a reality in Halton. We move around a lot. What we're trying to do as part of this, and that's why a lot of this is let's try to give some stability and some knowing or some knowledge as to where you're going to end up so that you can prepare kids or they know where they're going and there's not as many unknowns. I don't want to be doing redirections again. That's too much instability. There's no, it's hard to track. So that's part of this is, yes, there's the numbers. Yes, it's super technical. But part of this too is we want to recognize as part of the work we need to do that we want stability in these neighborhoods. And I think that's probably, at least my top priority as part of this review is let's stabilize this thing until we can, settle things down. So I hope that helps, but it's going to be part of the discussion, I guarantee you. Anything else on the transition committee that you guys want to add? I haven't been part of one, but that pretty much covered it.
if you guys have any questions about any of this, please direct it to the planning department. They gave you an email to send them, or you have mine, or you can send it to me and I'll forward it on. But please do, because if it's a question about how, or if you have other ideas, please send it to me.
Jessica?
That was my question, is where we could send other questions so that it doesn't extend this evening.
Yeah, that's exactly it. So that's good. Let me put up the thank you and question slide. So we're gonna skip the question slide, but yes, that's it for this evening. Please use the email, and then big topics are, the topics are the same. We'll bring them up as part of the housekeeping. We'll talk about those questions up front. Thank you everyone for your time this evening. I apologize we went over time. We'll try to keep it on track next go around, but appreciate it. Thanks again.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Andrew.